All right, it is 6:35 and I'm calling this meeting to order. All right, settle down. Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Storr. Straub.
Here.
Taylor.
Here.
Thorsland.
Here.
Banish Theronot. Wilson.
Here.
Carter.
Here.
Cowart. Esri.
Here.
Farney.
Here.
Furtado. Goss. Hanover Friedman.
Here.
Ingram.
Here.
Locke.
Here.
Lockshin.
Here.
Michaels. Pugh.
Present.
Rodriguez.
Here.
Rogers.
Present.
Sexton. Patterson.
Here. Next we have the, I actually don't have a prayer prepared, so we're going to do the Pledge of Allegiance. Clerk, could you please read the notice of the meeting?
Notice is hereby given that a regular meeting of the County Board, Champaign County, Illinois, will convene on September 21st, 2023, 6:30 p.m. in the Shields Carter Meeting Room, Brookings Administrative Center, 1776 East Washington Street, Urbana, Illinois, in said county for the purpose of allowing and ordering payments of claims against the county, receiving and acting upon reports of committees, and such other matters as may be brought before said meeting, which said meeting shall continue in session from day to day until the completion of said business.
Thank you. Next, we have approval of the agenda. Mr. Esri and Ms. Lockshin, any comments? All right, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right. Next is the date and time of the next regular meetings. You can see it's on the agenda. We have public participation. First, I have Angie Patton.
Good evening. I just want to take a minute to recognize two staff members who have dedicated almost 20 years of service to the county. One of their work anniversaries is tomorrow, and I wanted to make sure everyone knows what awesome staff they are. First, we have Kelly Pfeiffer, who's our senior vitals clerk, who has worked for the county for 18 years. He has served the diverse customers that have come to the county clerk's office for their vital records needs with patience and care. Kelly barely takes time off, even though he's encouraged to do so, and is professional and never late, and I mean never late. He's funny and smart, especially when admin has questions, and he advises on a lot of matters relating to vital records. Kelly is honest, sweet, and very caring, and I so appreciate his humor and professionalism. I have enjoyed working with Kelly since I started in 2019, and he has remained a constant and steadfast employee who never wavers and can always be counted on. Thank you, Kelly, for your service and for your hilarious stories about your dogs and cat. Rita Carr's 20-year anniversary is tomorrow, and she is the deputy clerk / account clerk in our Vital Records division. When I first started, Rita was instrumental in helping with all things budget. I'm biased, but Rita is the best account clerk this county has ever had. Rita has been instrumental in helping us utilize the grant funding and reconciling the grant funding accounts. In 2020, we were awarded $500,000 in CARES funding for the election. The grant turnaround time was a little over 4 months, so that meant we had to spend the money, get the procured items to Brookings, and submit the reimbursement requests. Special shout out to Director of Administration, Michelle Jett, who helped us spend all that money. And this was all during a pandemic, and this was before the new financial system, Munis, was in place. So it was all done in the AS 400. None of this would have been possible without Rita's organization and attention to detail. She also handles all the special licenses and contributes significantly to the Vitals team. Rita and I have worked very closely together on budget matters, and I appreciate her attention to every penny spent as she continually looks for ways to save money and always catches vendors' errors in billing. Rita is a valued member of our team and goes out of her way to help customers at the county each and every day. Thank you, Rita and Kelly, for your contributions and service to the county. We are so lucky you work in the clerk and recorder's office and cannot thank you enough for all you have done for the past 2 decades for the office and for the people of Champaign County. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Brian Dolliner.
Microphone, please.
Okay, it's been a while. I'm Brian Dolliner. I'm here with other folks to speak on the jail phone contract. I just wanted to bring out some sort of data and highlights of some of the figures that I've collected over the years. I've been working on this issue, which is almost 10 years I've been working on the issue. I FOIA'd for state contracts of phone information from 25 different counties throughout Illinois, 25 of the largest counties. Most all of them had some basic information about what it costs per phone call, and they vary widely. And reading through the Champaign County contract, I think you'll find it very difficult to find the actual cost of what it takes to make a phone call. I've got bank records that show it's between $6 for a 20-minute phone call, and all my calls are between $4 and $6, depending on the time of the call. The sheriff is quoting some other figures, and it's quite troubling that the sheriff doesn't know how much the phone calls cost himself. But I've taken those calls, and you'll hear from some other people tonight who've taken those calls themselves and know the cost and how expensive it is to take calls from the jail. There's other data out. The Ella Baker Center in Los Angeles put out a report called Who Pays in 2017. This is kind of the gold standard of information on jail phone calls. They found that 87% of those who are paying the phone bills are women. So this is overwhelmingly a women's issue. It's oftentimes women who provide the support networks for people incarcerated. The intake of our own county jail, according to the sheriff's most recent report, is that 59% of those who are taken in at the jail are African American. Okay, so this is overwhelmingly an issue of black women who are going to be paying the cost of these exorbitant phone calls at the county jail. So for those of us concerned with representing those people most impacted by the inequalities in our system, this is a real easy decision to make, to place the value of free phone calls at the county jail over what's being other concerns that are being raised of security. We think that there's an option that provides both security and safety at the jail and free phone calls. And we hope that the county board will make the right decision when the time comes. That's all I have for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I believe Leanne Kelly.
Is it on? It is on. Good. Okay. Good evening. I'm also here about the RFP regarding phone calls. And I am definitely concerned about the process and what is being requested in terms of voice print technology because I think that contributes to why these costs are going so high. So I want to present some different studies. Studies have consistently found that prisoners who maintain close contact with family members while incarcerated have better outcomes post-release and lower recidivism. Secondly, I'm not sure how many of you are aware of adverse childhood experiences. It is a study that came out over 8,000 people that Kaiser did in 1998. It has been replicated and also shown to be that what they came out with was true. This is 25 years ago, and studies have continued to show that it's true. There are 10 primary childhood experiences that put people at risk for a lot of poor outcomes, okay? Those outcomes include things like higher risk for physical and mental health issues, a shorter lifespan, and incarceration. So if you think about 47% of the people who are in state prisons and 57% of the people who are in our federal prisons are parents, the connection with the parent is critical to the wellness of their children. So finally, I think most of us are aware that the impact of what we now have identified as discriminatory laws in the 1980s has vastly increased the incarceration of African American people, as well as we know statistically that unfortunately lower income people are also heavily of an ethnic or different race. So I am really concerned that we are not considering the wellness of the most people involved, the wellness of the prisoner, the wellness of their children, as opposed to this idea of having voice print technology that would increase this. It seems to me that we're having $6 per phone call is actually asking people you're telling people that they might need to be punished. And that's not what I think the prison system is about, or is it supposed to be about. I think it's supposed to be about helping someone address the issues needed so they can function positively in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Sandra Otten. Sandra?
Hi, I'm Sandra Otten from Urbana, and I have had a loved one in jail before, and then he went to prison. Happy outcome, because he is now a productive member of society, thank God, and in large part because of the help that I gave him, that my mom gave him, that he got from the outside while he was in prison and in jail. But man, when he was in jail in the beginning, so stressful. You know, he was a kid, a 19-year-old, like many of the people in jail right now, and he did not know the first thing about how to manage the legal system, right? So he had a public defender, but was never getting calls from them. So, you know, I know how hard the sheriff's job is, but having free phone calls will make their job easier, because the inmates need to have somebody to vent to. They need to be surrounded by something besides just other criminals or potential criminals we don't even know because they haven't been proven guilty yet. So keep that in mind, that we're talking about people who are still haven't been even to court. And then the other thing, you know, this idea about voice print technology, it's new. It's brand new technology. We've never needed it here before. They can still use PIN numbers so that they can identify who's making what phone calls. And of course, the sheriff will tell you that people can trade PIN numbers and they can get by with things, you know, about that. But if somebody, for instance, violates their order of protection by using somebody else's PIN number, which they wouldn't be able to do it with voice print technology. It would be halted because they couldn't voice print to get onto the phone to get out. But if somebody does it, then take away their phone privileges. Don't let them call anybody anymore, right? If they're really abusing the phone privileges. But don't punish everybody by requiring the voice print technology, which is basically going to knock out the competition who isn't Securus or GTL. Those are the two companies that can provide the voice print technology. And we know that they are part of the big prison industrial complex that makes billions of dollars off of keeping people incarcerated. I know that's their job. They have to be to their, beholden to their shareholders, but there's a new player on the scene who will not be able to give you voice print technology, but will be able to give you free phone calls for less than you're paying just for the service fees now. So right now the county pays $60,000 a year in service fees to Securus and then extorts all this money out of the inmates and their families. And the new company says that they will be able to provide free phone calls for the cost of $50,000 in service fees alone and no extra charges to the inmates or their families at all. Now, this sheriff has amended the RFP to include that he wants 2 free phone calls, but he also says he wants an answer as to how they're going to provide then more phone calls than 2 free. How are they going to charge the people when they make more than 2 phone calls a day? Nobody makes more than 2 phone calls a day from jail because you're basically not allowed to. You have to get in line, you have to wait for your turn, other people want to use the phone. So I'd say that's not really an issue, which it may be a red herring, and I just want you to be aware of that. I know the sheriff has every good intention. I know that he wants calm situation at the jail. He wants the technology to be as easy as possible to use. And I love that we're going to be able to potentially support this not-for-profit who's going to be able to make headway into, they're already in several states, they're already in several prisons, they're already at the juvenile detention center here in town, just started, so we'll see how that goes. But it's a very progressive thing to do, and it is a trend, it's on trend. The IDOC, the Illinois Department of Corrections, only charges a penny a minute, and that's that's it. They're basically free and it's the trend because people know that it's the right thing to do, and certainly Champaign County knows it's the right thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Tamika Davis.
Good evening. We're talking about the phone calls that's in the Champaign County Jail. I was once one of those people that sat there. I was once one of those people that couldn't speak to my child because the calls were so high. I was once one of those people that when the school called, I couldn't respond to the child, the school. I couldn't respond to my kid's doctor because the phone call, are they going to say, there's a phone call from Tamika Davis from the Champaign County Jail. They're not going to answer that. Let's be real. Now, to do the breakdown, is it fair that a child has to actually be penalized with the parent because they've made the mistake of going to the county jail or whatever the situation may have been? Now, if you really do the math on the phone call, it's $6 for 20 minutes. That's $180 a month. If I made 2 phone calls every day, that's $360. And if I got sentenced to 6 months in the county jail, like I did, that is actually $1,080. Now I'm taking from my kids because now they live with their grandmother. I'm taking from the food desert. They talk about the food desert and different things like that. So now I'm taking food from off the table that could be there. How am I in the same county, in the same city, down the same street, and I'm paying $6 for a phone call using the same area code? this is something we must address. Communication shouldn't be a distress. A line has been crossed when communication with your child is at a cost. Regardless of their case or their fate, everyone deserves a chance to communicate. What if I need to call my lawyer? They don't always answer the phone. Why that phone call can't be free? Why am I stuck behind a wall and I'm trying to fight my case? That's not a good way of fighting your case. So with that being said, I hope that the sheriff looks at it to where they really look deep down and say, you know what, these phone calls are extremely high. The penitentiary phone calls are cheaper. My cell phone is cheaper. $180 a month, I only pay $75. And I can add another line for that. And then add a phone call to that, adding extra money to my phone. I don't think that that's something that I would like to do. So please consider changing that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Carol Spindell.
Hello. Is it on? Okay. Hi, I'm Carol Spindell. I'm speaking for the ACLU of Champaign County. We certainly support the idea of free phone calls for the people in the county jail. But we would also like to bring up another issue, and we have some questions and concerns that we feel that the county board should address when they consider this issue of adopting a new provider for phone service. Voice printing is biometric information. Each person's voice print is unique. It belongs only to you. And here in Illinois, we have one of the most protective, best, thanks to the ACLU, laws protecting biometric privacy in the country. You can't take someone's biometric information here in Illinois. A private company cannot without informing you and getting your permission to do so. However, as a government entity, that law is called BIPA. However, as a government entity, the Sheriff's Department is exempt, and so are their contractors from BIPA. They do not have to observe it. However, we want to point out to board members that it does seem important to ask questions and to consider what sort of restrictions and limits are going to be placed on this data collection of this very private, unique biometric information. We don't even know what technology could come up in the future and what could be done with this information. A company responding to this RFP, there doesn't seem to be any limit on how long can they keep this data. What can they do with this data? If I call someone in the county jail and they now have my voice print, can they sell it for their own profit? There doesn't seem to be, these are questions that I really hope you, as our elected representatives, will ask before you commit to a contract, because I do not think that Champaign County residents, even though the sheriff is not bound by BIPA, want this information out in the private sector without any restrictions at all on what can be done with it. So how long can they keep these voice prints? There should be a limit. What can they do with these voice prints? How secure is their storage system? Who will be notified if their storage system is breached and our voice prints are taken? So these are the kind of, if you do pursue an option with voice print technology, which I think has risks given the changes in technology that are coming and what private companies, do sometimes with this very private information that once they have it, if no limits are placed on what they can do with it. So I hope you will ask some very substantive questions about that if you decide to pursue a company with voice print technology. However, that doesn't seem to be necessary in order to get phone service at the jail. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we have Randy Nelson.
Good evening. I've chosen to come to speak to you tonight out of concerns that we are unnecessarily limiting our options in getting phone service for the county jail. It's my faith that motivates me to be here tonight. Because even though there's significant legal and financial issues involved here, there are moral issues as well. If we require responders to the RFP to collect voice prints without inmates' consent, only two companies, Secresus and Global Telelink, are eligible to submit proposals. These two companies control 80% of the industry in the United States. And from fees just from prison and jail calls, they're extracting $1.4 billion annually from those least able to pay, but who need this service to maintain contact with their families. According to the nonprofit and nonpartisan Prison Policy Initiative, prison and jail-imposed barriers to family contact fly in the face of decades of social science research, showing associations between family contact and outcomes, including in-prison behavior, measures of health, and recidivism. Restricting phone calls access increases social isolation. Research has found that loneliness and isolation have direct health risks that were equivalent to daily cigarette usage or alcohol abuse. Research from Cornell University and the University of Chicago also found a link between isolation and mental and physiological risk factors, such as obesity and symptoms of depression. The Brookings Institution reported that the median income of employed men prior to incarceration was $6,250. And in any given year, in the decade prior to incarceration, only half of the prisoners had any reported earnings. By making residents of the county jail and their families pay exorbitant prices for phone calls, we are forcing them to choose between mainly maintaining family contacts that are important for their mental, emotional, and physical health, and using their limited funds to buy food and pay rent. The Alabaca Center, a human rights organization, reports that nationwide, more than 1/3 of the families go into debt for jail and prison phone calls and visits. Although it is called the Department of Corrections, our penal system seems to abandon any notion of rehabilitation, and our prisons are largely instruments of punishment. However, we must remember that the county jail, people in the county jail are simply awaiting trial and are presumed to be innocent. It's sufficiently traumatic for them to have been removed from society, but it's inhumane to punish them by charging inflated fees just to maintain contact with their support network. I don't want our county to be part of this systematic abuse of our poorest and most vulnerable citizens by supporting companies that extract large amounts of money from them just to stay in touch with their families. There are options that will cost the county less and provide free phone calls for the inmates. We can do better.
Thank you. Next, and I apologize if I'm not saying this right, Tesfaye Wold Medine.
Good evening. I'm Tesfaye Wold Medine, and I want to speak against the exorbitant price of making a phone call in jails. Just to give you a background, from my background, so you have a sense of where I'm coming from. I am am a graduate of the University of Illinois. I have a PhD in cultural anthropology and a master's degree in the same department, and a master's in library science, all from our beloved university. But I have also a BA degree in sociology from Ethiopia before I came to the United States for graduate studies. And it's remarkable, this sociology degree, bachelor's degree, was one that was created from a merger of social work and a small department of sociology at a time in Ethiopia. That was a time of revolutionary upheaval. And the School of Social Work was folded because it was determined that it was not appropriate for the times. But it gave me some of the sensibilities that are relevant for this situation, which is about prisons, correction, those kinds of juvenile delinquency, criminology. These are some of the things that we were talking about in that department. And so with that general background, I would say that many of the people who land in prison, in jails, are from social backgrounds that are economically disadvantaged. Social backgrounds with economic difficulties. And as a cultural anthropologist and a sociologist, my sense is that in lower level, in communities that are economically that have difficult economic life, the support of family and friends and the social support that they get is very decisive. And this becomes even more important under the circumstance of the jail, which means that it might become a time of very high stress, very full of anxiety. So a barrier like the one we are talking about, exorbitant price for a phone call, might just result in that kind of barrier. And the result might be extremely stressful, especially for some individuals with some psychological profiles. And it could be an extreme punishment at a time when the person is not even a convicted criminal. So my appeal to you is that it's a very serious matter to consider. I mean, to find ways to do away with this kind of difficulty in our jails. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we have Dottie Wise.
Good evening. I'm Dottie Wise. I've been a resident of Champaign County in Urbana for the past 10 years. And when I first came here, the first thing that I got involved in really was dealing with the jail situation and through all the discussions about what should be done. And right now, you're dealing with a very specific issue. And I'm looking at the decision on the new contract for telephone service through the lens of what would be best both for the individuals detained in the jail, the vast majority of whom will be returning to the community, and also what would be best for the communities themselves. there's some things that I know. I'm going to go through things that I know, things that I'm kind of pretty sure of, things I'm not sure at all about, and then the concerns that I have. It's going to be much briefer than some of my presentations to the board in the past. Things I know. As others have said, for people who are arrested, the long-term outcomes as productive citizens and family members are better if they maintain the contact with their families during any time they spend in jail or prison. Things I'm sure about in most cases. People are entitled to keep what they create unless they've agreed to give it away or have sold it to others. This would include their likeness, their way of moving, their voices, especially as they would be processed by technology. And this was one of the issues in the actors' strike about the artificial intelligence being used to create pseudo people that could act on screen. And then things I'm not sure about. I'm not sure whether the recording of calls would include the voices of the individuals on the other end of the call. I'm not sure whether anyone would know they were being recorded or whether everyone would know they were being recorded and possibly having voice prints made. And I'm not sure about all the mechanics of arranging phone calls by people in the jail, how much information about those calls is kept by or available to the jail staff, the legalities of ownership of any recordings, or to what extent jail staff have other way of keeping track of who's making calls to the same person on the outside that they have questions about. So the concerns that I have, and it's real similar to what's been mentioned by a number of other people. In the potential agreement with Securus, the company that has a current contract and has bid on the new RFP, the voice prints of detained persons apparently would become their property, which they could sell to government agencies or to libraries or of voice print data, and potentially making very large profits, as has been mentioned. So why would the jail residents have to pay $6 per 20-minute call? This would be a major expense from their point of view and for their families, and a barrier to keeping in touch and having the support that results in better outcomes. And again, why isn't Secure saying that they would pay them or pay the jail for it? It's kind of backwards. And this is especially relevant to the decision as a nonprofit company has also submitted a proposal, and it would include the 3 free phone calls per day per jail resident and no recording or voice print, and therefore no civil liberties issues that, by the way, the county could possibly be liable for. I hope that you'll all consider the pros and cons of each proposal with these issues in mind. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Marina Manadi.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Marina Manadi, and I came here in 1977 as a student of the U of I, and I'm still here. And I very much care for this community, and I care for everybody in it. And I've listened to stories of people in jail here, and they have been horrifying. People dragged screaming into solitary confinement rooms. These are people waiting for trial. We don't know what is happening in there. There are children who are outside who have parents in there. These children need contact with their parents. They need to learn possibly from their parents' mistakes if there were mistakes. They need to hear the story if there weren't mistakes on the part of the parent, but there were mistakes on the part of the officers. Tales need to be told, narratives need to be heard, and children need to understand what's going on in their life. This is a huge part of an education of a human being. And when you mark up the price of a phone call to a parent, you are prohibiting that narrative from happening. And that causes trauma. And the cycles of trauma escalate. And what causes criminality? Trauma. So if you want more criminality, just keep it going as it is. Expensive phone calls between people who are waiting for justice and people who are outside hoping for justice. So that I heard also and learned, because it's an ongoing education life, deep and long and hard sometimes, that $6 for the first few minutes, that's outrageous. Just outrageous for people who are already hurting on many other fronts. And those who can pay, it's no sweat. How fair is that? So that we are possibly getting biometrically recorded, and this is going to be possibly used in a market in the future. Well, I've heard about surveillance capitalism. There's a book yay thick about it. It seems completely in line with what we've been told is going on here. I don't want surveillance of every biometric characteristic of myself going out into the market. And if there's anything that causes criminality, it's trauma on top of trauma. We need to reduce this trauma. We need to know exactly what's happening in the prison or the jail system and the prison system both. We need to have as maximal contact as possible. Hands, voices, touch, because all of that is critical to all of our health, the future of our children and ourselves as well. These are our people who are in jail. And these are our people who are in prison as well. And predictions have been made that things are escalating and the future is bleak by a lot of scholars. I don't think we need to fan the flames of the trauma and the violence that could happen. These calls need to be as close to free or free as they can possibly be. And no one needs to be making money hand over fist with the trauma of children and people we haven't even brought into the court yet, as well as people who have gone to the court. Access in communication has to be as easy and as unprofitable as possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we have Barbara Kessel.
Barbara Kessel from Urbana. I think I'm the last speaker on this subject. I would like to talk about you, the board. I don't know you very well. I haven't come to many board meetings, and so I decided about a week ago to watch the Committee of the Whole that's on the YouTube. And I thought I would just dip into it. And I became enthralled. I watched for 2 hours. And then I went back and picked different spots. I spent 3 hours watching your Committee of the Whole. And what was so interesting was your discussion about the budget and the funding. And when you had every single person go around and say what they thought about the coming belt tightening that you would face. And then I realized, well, that's what the county board does. They're all about funding things. Somebody asked me, do they make policy for the jail? I said, no, the county board doesn't make policy. They just fund things. That's what they do. And I was really struck by how seriously each of you take that responsibility of not going into deep debt and trying to meet all your responsibilities, and how to get more tax revenue, the whole discussion about getting more money to make it balance, and the fact that the guy came and talked about how health care insurance is calling up 20% for all the employees in the county. That's an enormous amount of money, and you're going into debt. So then I thought about our issue, and I thought, well, gee, is it going to cost the county board more money to give free phone calls? And it hit me for the first time. You don't pay for those phone calls. All the $6 that every phone call is, every penny of it goes to Securus. So if you take away that money, no money comes out of your pocket at all. The second thing I noticed struck me by watching that Committee of the Whole was that somewhere in that discussion, I can't remember where, but there was a person that came from a department to ask for approval for a contract, a new contract to repair fiber optic cables. And Ms. Fortato asked the person, the department chair, or representative of the department, she said, why did you happen to pick the bid that cost the most by quite a bit and not any of the ones that were less expensive? And the person said, well, we've used them before and we like them. And everybody voted okay. Now, I would hope that in the future you be more curious about different bids and what they cost. And I hope that you do that with this particular issue, that you find out before the choice is done and you are faced with a choice of having to say no to the sheriff, which I know none of you want to do, that before that you ask for the best bids to see them. I know you can do that. And look at the costs of the various contracts that responded to that bid. My final point is simply, you have spent a lot of money in the last few years with due diligence to fight violence, anti-violence funds from the federal government. And I think that providing free phone calls at the jail is a very good investment in anti-violence. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Michelle Jett.
Hello, Michelle Jett, Champaign. I just want to
add to the conversation as we're talking about the racial disparity, social justice component of the cost of phone calls, that the reason the state of Illinois has such cheap phone calls is because of the legislation of our own state representative, Carol Ammons, who was our first African-American and African-American female state representative for the 103rd District. So I think that in the context of who's paying for the phone calls, who's doing this work, it's important that we acknowledge that this path has been blazed by a woman of color. And the next thing on the agenda is the Muhammad Aquifer. And so I also just wanted to point out that Representative Ammons again and our late Senator Scott Bennett co-sponsored the bill that protects our aquifer and saved our drinking water. So I think that to me just highlights that we have elected officials in this county that are doing great things for our county. And I think we have a lot of those in this room as well. And it's a very doable thing for us to affect large change with not radically large action.
Thank you. I have no more slips for public comment. If there's anybody else who'd like to speak. Not seeing any. So moving on, we have the consent agenda. Could I have a motion? Mr. Farney, Mr. Esri. Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Straub,
Yes.
Taylor,
Yes.
Thorsland,
Yes.
Banish Thiernot,
Yes.
Wilson,
Yes.
Carter,
Yes.
Esri,
Yes.
Barney,
Yes.
Furtado, Hanover Friedman,
Yes.
Ingram,
Yes.
Locke,
Yes.
Lockshin,
Yes.
Michaels,
Yes.
Pugh,
Yes.
Rodriguez,
Yes.
Rogers,
Yes.
Patterson.
Yes. All right. Next, we have communications.
I don't usually do this, and I know we don't usually respond to public comment, but I did want to say just a couple of things. I wanted to publicly thank Danielle Chenoweth, who is in our community as one of the nationally leading people who thinks about issues of phone call justice. And I wanted to publicly thank her because I've had copious amounts of conversations with her about this issue, and she's provided both to myself and also to the sheriff a really nice summary of research with lots and lots of links to some of the best scholarship on this issue. I also wanted to say that I also wanted to acknowledge the fact that the sheriff has kind of taken a step that is not often done in the RFP process, and has invited two board members, myself and Jen Straub, to sit on the RFP review process to give feedback because he recognizes that this is such an important issue for the board. Two other things I just wanted to say, just because I think it's important to make sure we're all on the same page. Our contract with Securus, and I'm not saying that I'm pro this or against this, but our contract with Securus since 2018 has had voice print capabilities. It's written into the contract as it currently stands and has been since 2018. I'm not weighing in on whether that's a good thing. I think the civil liberties questions are very important and something that need to be discussed. But I wanted to acknowledge that. And then the last thing I wanted to say is, just so that we're clear, on the RFP that was about the fiber optic cables, my questions were the opposite. We took the low bid, and the low bid was so much lower than the other bids that I was concerned if they could actually provide the service. And I know sometimes on YouTube especially, it's really difficult to hear those things, but I just wanted to be clear that it is very difficult to legally, in an RFP process, to take a high bidder just because we like that company. That's just not something that's not allowed, right? And it wouldn't get through a review process. So I just wanted to make sure that that was clear. But mostly, I just wanted to specifically thank Danielle, because she's helped me become more informed about this issue, and I do take that responsibility very seriously.
Mr. Pugh?
Yes, just want to remind people that the Saturday after this one, September 30th from 1 to 5, is Pride Fest in Urbana. We'll have the parade again, starting at 2:30, if I remember right. It goes from Illinois to Green and kind of around downtown, ends around the backside. Of course, there are events throughout this whole next week. Just go to unitingpride.org to find out more. Thanks.
Ellie?
Yeah, it is Suicide Prevention Month, and I had the opportunity last night actually to hear a really amazing speaker that I wanted to bring to the attention of the board, the public, and also specifically some of our elected officials and department heads, specifically Attorney General, Mental Health, the Sheriff. And that speaker was Cordelia Coppelson of the Illinois Office of the Attorney General. She's assigned to the Criminal Enforcement Division of the Illinois Attorney General's office and is the chief of the Law Enforcement Training Bureau. And she was speaking on firearm restraining orders. And as some of you may know, this is a relatively recent law in Illinois. And so there's still a lot of public awareness and education that needs to happen. But I wanted to just share, especially with our elected officials, that she is available to provide training for any office that is interested. And again, a firearm restraining order gives law enforcement and family members the ability to temporarily remove firearms from somebody who is thought to be a danger to themselves or others. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Esri?
Just a quick note, I guess. Fall's here. Harvest is here. It's started. It's not in full swing by any means, but it's going on. And so if you're out and about in the county, in the rural areas, just be aware, pay attention to the equipment when it's out on the road. Would ask of everybody. I mean, even farmers themselves, they likely maybe get a little too complacent. But and just give us farmers, I guess, a little bit of grace and when we're moving our equipment on the roads, and I think most farmers try and give the other commuters some grace and stuff too, and just know that like if we aren't pulling over, it's maybe because there's a mailbox coming up or something like that, and we oftentimes, pull over, but we pull over when it's best for us because we can see ahead, we know the roads, and if you don't know them, we aren't necessarily trying to hold you behind us. We know where it's best to pull over to let you by. So thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Ingram?
It is currently, we're in the season for training for the CU one-to-one mentoring program, which is still, as always, seeking more mentors to sign up. I will remind everybody that it is not a weekend go pick somebody up mentoring program, just to dispel that notion. It is a spend an hour a week during the school year on school grounds, usually during lunch or PE, with a kid who is likely right now every day going to check with their mentoring coordinator at their school to find out whether they've been matched with somebody. We have hundreds of kids across Champaign and Urbana who are looking for mentors. The trainings that are left are on Tuesday, October 3rd, which is a lunchtime training from 11:30 to 1:30 a.m. to p.m. And then Thursday, there's an evening training, Thursday the 12th of October, 6:30 to 8:30. Both of those are at the Mellon Building in Champaign, which means you can go to Hopscotch Bakery right across the street and get a snack, and then go to the Mellon Building. But again, it's an important program. I've been a part of it for a long time. My mentee just graduated last year, and I'm getting ready to re-up with a fresh mentee. And there's a very great need, and the thought of kids checking in regularly to find out whether or not somebody has been matched with them is heartbreaking for me every day. So if you like any information on that, you can get a hold of me anytime. And I want to make sure I'm getting the website right because I always say it incorrectly. It is CU, the letters C and U, the number 1, the word 2, TO, another 1, so cu1to1.org. Or if you just search CU One-to-One Mentoring Program, you'll find the social media pretty much everywhere. Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Yeah, I just wanted to let folks know that last week, the Moderna and Pfizer updated vaccines were approved by the CDC and are available for appointments now. You can go to Walgreens, CVS, your local doctor's office, what have you. They are approved for 6 months and up, They are a single shot, and they are considered the new version of the vaccine. All previous versions have been rescinded, as this is the most up-to-date vaccine you can get. It's targeting the variants that are going around now. There are guidance on if you've been infected recently or the last time you had a booster, when you can get it. And your insurance company should cover this. If they do not, you would really want to save your receipt if you get charged for it and submit that to your insurance company. Some are limiting it to in-network providers, so check with your insurance company before you go. But appointments are filling up. There will be more shipments throughout the year. And you can decide when best to get your vaccine so that you're fully protected for the holidays that are coming up. And you can get it at the same time as your flu shot. There's also a brand new RSV vaccine for the very young or the over 65 folks. RSV is a respiratory virus that tends to affect the very old and the very young very adversely. And this is new. They do not recommend getting it at the same time as your COVID shot or your flu shot because it's new. They just don't have enough data yet. It's not expected to be dangerous. And we would greatly encourage that as well. You can also get 4 free COVID tests from the government now. From the covidtest.gov website, you fill out your email, they ask a few questions, you put in your address. They will mail 4 free tests per household. It is cold and flu season is upon us. You may have noticed cases are rising, so those may come in handy.
Thank you. And the COVID tests, you could start applying on Monday. And they will only send one to an address. I've tried. Anybody else? All right, moving on, we have the Muhammad Aquifer Mapping Project.
Hi there. My name is Jason Thomason. I'm a geologist with the Prairie Research Institute at the University of Illinois. I'm joined by Kisa Mokamiwale Gilkey, who is sitting behind me. We are the 2 scientists, geoscientists, who are leading this project, a project that you all are quite familiar with because this project was funded by the county. And we are so appreciative of it and excited to give you a little update on how this projects have been going in the last year or so. It's a project that's aimed at mapping the character and the distribution of the Muhammad Aquifer in Champaign County using a technology called helicopter-based time domain electromagnetics. That's the only time I'll say that. The origins of this project are long-spanning decades of at least scientific research into the Muhammad Aquifer, spanning back to the 40s with the U of I scientists and the University of Chicago scientists. Moving all the way into the 90s, we developed new technology, gathered new data. Our colleagues at the Illinois State Water Survey and the Prairie Research Institute have done groundwater flow modeling, predictive modeling of the Muhammad Aquifer in the 2000s, which leads us to the project that we'll talk about today, that is using the latest technology in basically geologic mapping, which is airborne electromagnetics. I guess I did say it again. Of course, a project like this, anybody would know that it takes dozens and dozens of collaborators. Of course, you folks have all been very supportive of this. Champaign County Group's first group has been very supportive, all the way from bigger organizations like that to the Prairie View Ogden School District was a great supporter of this project. They let us drill a hole on their property. So all spectrums of support for this project have been fantastic. And we've been able to train 6 geology students from University of Illinois and ISU through this project for the last summer. Again, the technology is using airborne electromagnetic technology, where there's this helicopter that tows a big antenna and a receiver and an emitter. So it emits electrical energy into the ground. That energy comes back to a receiver, and we can basically image the subsurface and the geologic framework down to about 1,000 feet. This is a technology that was developed in Denmark, and they are the experts of the world. We work with them closely and collaborate with them a lot. So it's been a fantastic resource for us as well. In Champaign County, we decided to use that funding and fly the densest we could fly as far as data density. In the upper right, the figure shows flight lines, which is almost basically covering the entire county, covering the spatial extent of the Mahomet Aquifer in the county. So the objectives are, first, with the Mahomet Aquifer, we wanted to know where it is exactly. We have a pretty good idea, but this is a technology that can really pinpoint where the extent of it is. You know, on the order of a mile or two can make a big difference on where we can site a well, where residents can find water. We also want to know what it's like. Is it sandy over here, gravelly over here, more clay rich? And that can govern how much water and how much water we can get out of it and how long it'll last, and water quality as well. Again, this is we are not in a water emergency in this area, but we are intending to use this project as long-term water monitoring. Long-term protection, my fault. We also want to address bedrock geology. We'll get into that in a little bit. So again, a flight line map of where we flew in Champaign County. We couldn't fly over cities, and we couldn't fly really over the interstates because of safety and because of electrical interference. The data would just not be any good anyway. So what can we see with these? I want to flip through some slides that are going to talk about geology a little bit, but that's the goal, and just show you some of the bigger framework geologic entities that we're seeing with these data. This is similar to what we've been calling it like an MRI of the Earth. So it's a data set that we're not even familiar with. It's so dense and amazing, and we're very excited. Anyway, electrical energy is reflected in the geology by having materials that are very conductive and they can transmit electrical energy easily, but then other materials are very resistive to electrical energy. And those being, for example, limestones are very resistive to electrical current as opposed to shales and coals. And geologically, we know generally where these are. We can also see with these data, we can see structures where rocks and sediments have been folded or faulted, and we see some of those as well in the data. So to look at a preliminary data set from Champaign County, we're going to go from north to south looking at blocks of the data. The red stuff in the subsurface are limestones. Again, this is down to about 1,000 feet. And we see those limestones actually fold down into the subsurface, and then they're truncated by shales on the right side. We see what we call the Mahomet Dome. This is a fold structure where the gas field is out north of Mahomet. We see more folds on the east side of the county. That folded rock called the LaSalle Anticline. It's just a name, but we see these structures that we've never been able to see before in images like this. Again, taking like an MRI of the Earth. We see all these different bedrock structures and different bedrock lithologies and the relationships of where they are relative to one another. And lastly, we pick up this thing called the Pasodum Anticline, which is another fold structure named after the town of Pasodum. Again, we have some data gaps. Anywhere we have a little town, we couldn't fly over those towns. So there are small data gaps, but we have other ways to fill in those gaps. Thinking about the Mahomet Aquifer, what we just looked at were the bedrock deposits. That's deeper. And the Mahomet Aquifer and all the glacial sediments, glacially derived sediments, are all on top of that bedrock. This is an image on the left of the topography of that bedrock, where we have a valley that's incised through that bedrock, which houses basically the Mahomet Aquifer. We have these tributary valleys that are all filled in with a large quantity of sand, and which composes the Mahomet Aquifer. So we generally know where it is. We've studied it for decades and decades. But again, what we can see with the glacial materials, with the HTEM, the airborne data, are again resistive versus conductive materials. Clay deposits, which are very, they do not conduct water very well. They also don't conduct electricity very well. So we see those as conductive units, which will be shown in blue. And the glacial, or the aquifer deposits, the sand and gravel deposits, are more resistive to electricity, and those are shown in red. We also see different landscape features, such as ridges that were formed by glacial standstills. We see outwash fans of sand and gravel deposits that were deposited at the time of glaciation. Lots of different neat scientific stuff like that. So we'll start from the north to south again. This time, the bedrock surface is in there, and anything we see that's colored are glacial materials. And all that bedrock stuff is underneath this surface. And we start to see, again, these ridges, what we call a Gifford moraine. That's a clay ridge. Out in front of that are outwash fans of sand and gravel. We start to pick up the Mahomet sand in the valley, and we see the larger kind of broad red blob there. That's the Mahomet aquifer in the subsurface, and we start to pick up where we can start to see what we think is the boundary of the Mahomet aquifer, which is relatively close to where we've thought it was. And we pick it up south of Mahomet and southwest of Champaign for sure. So overall, it's an amazing data set. This is kind of what we would call, again, the MRI of Champaign County. We see bedrock units, we see shallow sand and gravel units, we see the Mahomet aquifer in general. But one of the things we really want to start to focus in on is what are the details? What is this aquifer like? Is it sandy here? Is it clay here? Because those are the things that can really help us do long-term predictions and help us improve our long-term predictions of water resources and long-term protection of that resource. At this point, we have some different interpretations of where that valley boundary is, the Mahomet boundary. This is one of them from years past. This is another one that's more recent. So our data are going to start testing those hypotheses, basically, testing those interpretations, and hopefully improve them. So to look more closely at one of these profiles, for example, this is where the helicopter flew from left to right, and we start to see these different color gradients, and we interpret those electrical properties as clay-rich deposits, sand deposits, and then as we get further deeper, we get into shale and different limestone deposits. Those are the containers for the Mahomet sand and the Mahomet aquifer. We've done some ground-based testing of these data to try to ground truth these data. We have the same technology, but we have to run it along the ground. Takes a lot longer. And just a quick example of the cost it took to fly this helicopter was $385,000, funded by the county again. It took us 7 days to fly it. If we were to do the same technology ground-based, it would take us 12.3 years and $3.5 million. That's not really feasible, but it's just a comparison to that it's the bang for the buck is there, and that's why this is a technology that's kind of exploding around the world. It's being used more readily. Again, we want to look more closely into the Mahomet and what it's like and what's the variability within it. So we can even look more closely at the data. This is kind of how the data is collected, these soundings, that pulses of energy every 50 meters along transects. And at the top of the upper figure, we've zoomed in and pulled that out to the lower figure where we have control borings next to the figure, and we can start to look at the different measurements of the materials, and then we interpret those where we can really see variability on the scale of a half a mile, which we would never be able to see with just borings. We don't have that data density ever. So this is just crazy to us to see this density. This is a half a mile, and we see the variability like that. We have 3,000 miles to interpret. So we're going to use some machine learning kind of stuff to help us do that. we can't do that all manually. Last thing I wanted to talk about is just that we were able to drill a hole last summer. We used this as a training episode for a lot of our students. It's an exciting thing to drill 200 feet down into the ground and record the history of the Earth at that location. And we had, again, coordination and cooperation with the Prairie Ogden School District. They were very amenable to this. So we collected core at that site. A couple of our county board members stopped out there, and it was fantastic to see them. This was out in a little town called Flatville, northeast of Champaign, Urbana, where we didn't really have a lot of data. So we picked this site because it's kind of a barren place where we didn't have a lot of good data. And here's the fanciest part of any PowerPoint that I've ever done. So this is kind of a reflection of how that helicopter works, and kind of some of the raw data that we can see, the different color schemes that went. Let's just see that again. So thanks. So again, the different color schemes, the red and the yellows are sandy materials. We had a control boring at Flatbill right through that transect. And so the sand and the Muhammad Aquifer are very much reflective. We did pick up this clay unit, and we've been trying to test and look at the data different ways to see really how defined and how refined we can interpret these data. And it looks like we're getting some pretty detailed resolution in the data, which is fantastic. This is the stuff we want to know. We want to know where those little clay lenses are. We want to know where the Muhammad is more gravelly than it is sandy. And this is one way we're doing it. Where do we go from here? So the rest of this year and probably early into next year, we're going to finish processing these data. This is brand new data that, again, Kisa, my colleague here, she's the geophysicist. She's the one that's been doing all the processing of all these data. An unbelievable amount of work and great work. And then I'm the geologist. I got to go in and interpret all this stuff. So we're going to work as a team here in the next year or so to start building 3D models of the geology, 3D predictions of how the geology changes. At this point in the game, the budget is up there to the right. We've spent almost all of it, which was expected. We have about $28,000 left where we're going to hire another student. We'll do a little bit more field work this coming fall and next spring and spend out that money. And then in the long term, we will work more closely with our colleagues at the Illinois State Water Survey and try to integrate our data into their predictive models. So they have these beautiful predictive groundwater flow models based on physics that they can do different pumping scenarios and withdrawal scenarios and really do some fantastic work. And they're excited to see some of these data as well and integrate those data. So once again, thank you again for the support, and happy to take any questions and provide any feedback for you guys. Yeah, I see that. It's one of those handsome guys that stopped by.
I just think we all need to give a shout out to Chris Storr, who I'm sure is internally screaming right now at not being here for this. I think although his head might have exploded during that one slide, so maybe it's best that he wasn't here. But he was so integral in all of us having as much up-to-date information about this as possible, and no one was more excited about that helicopter than he was. And I'm not speaking of him. He's still alive, as I realize that I'm talking about him in a way that seems past tense for those watching at home. He's just not here tonight, and I'm sure that is just killing him. So
Yeah, I bet.
That's all.
Yeah, no doubt he's watching. Jenny?
Thank you for the presentation. I was fortunate to be able to attend the media day last year.
Fantastic.
Jamala Rogers and Dr. Storr. And to see like what actually came of watching the helicopter take off and watching like the whole process is fascinating. My question is, I guess, is there any application for the data that you've collected that can be used outside of this project, like outside of the aquifer mapping?
In Champaign County? Yeah, I mean, anything geological. So it could be used for aggregate resources. It could be used for deeper understanding of the bedrock, which ties into maybe I don't want to go too far, but the gas field, for example, over in Mahomet. Or I know that there are the carbon sequestration projects. One of them is in Gibson City, for example, where they're sequestering carbon. Our data gets down to about 1,000 feet. So anything relative to that would be applicable. But my first guess is aggregate resources, biological land use resources, that kind of thing.
Great, thank you.
Could be a good data set.
First off, thank you so much. I don't have any really important questions except for one is I didn't catch your name properly when you first started. I'm so sorry.
I'm sorry, that's all right. Jason Thomason is the name, yeah. Sure. And my colleague is Kisa Mokanyamale.
Thanks, Kisa, and thanks, Jason.
Sure.
It was it's really cool. I didn't even know Flatville existed till I got there. Sorry for those people that live in Flatville, but it is definitely flat. But it's very intriguing. And your survey data goes to 1,000 feet. How deep is the aquifer?
The aquifer only gets to, the deepest part of the aquifer is maybe 350 to 400 feet deep. We have the highest resolution of data in that upper 300 feet. Our resolution of data declines as we get deeper. So that was part of the intent of using these technology as well. But
Just because you want to know what was underneath the aquifer, or?
knowing what's underneath is very important as well, because water is flowing not only within the aquifer, but between the bedrock and the sand itself. There is water flow, and if it's shale as a bedrock, water flow will not be very communicative between those two units. But limestone is fractured, and you can get more water flow between limestone and the Mahomet aquifer. So it's good to know where those different bedrock units are as well, and the geometry of them as well.
So 300 feet. So I'm going to ask a really stupid question then. So the water just sits there, moves around a little bit, but it's not going to drain out somewhere. It's just going to be there, I don't know, for the next 10 years, a couple thousand years, I have no idea.
It's always moving.
It's always moving. Okay.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, all right. And one more. So
Oh, yeah.
about what's the volume? Do you know any idea what the volume is?
Volume is always the question that people ask, and that's where I defer to my water scientists at the water survey. However, it's a question that's hard for them to answer because it's a system, it's an aquifer system where there's volumes of water moving in and out of the system at all times.
Oh, okay.
So it's not a stagnant bathtub of water, and it changes seasonally as well. Gradients, water tables change seasonally, pumping changes seasonally. So they're always trying to make predictions and calculations based on these fluxes of water in and out of the system. I'll stick with that answer.
All right, thanks.
I might add, sorry, that the good thing about data like this, we might be able to tell the volume of the container. We won't tell you the volume of the water, but the volume of the container. So looking at the aquifer, we can say this is the size of the aquifer. It can hold this much water.
Right, so you know how big the bathtub is, you just don't know how much water is in the bathtub.
That's a good point. Good way to look at it, yeah.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thanks a lot. I really appreciate it
You're
and all the
welcome.
work you
Thank
guys
you
have been
very
able to do.
See you again in about a year.
All right. Next, we have the approval of minutes from the August 24th, 2023 regular meeting. Carter, Ingram, any discussion? All right, all those in favor? Aye. That passes. Then we just have our standing committees, summary of action, as well as for the cow. Finance, adoption of ordinance number 2023-16, updating the Champaign County Clerk and Recorder's
I'll second. Carter moved.
Carter, election.
Discussion? Are we? Okay. As I kind of mentioned at the last meeting, and I'll apologize a little bit because when I read this initially in the packet for the last meeting, the way that it said notaries instead of notarizations, I thought that we were still talking about notaries coming through the clerk's office, and I didn't quite catch it until we were talking about it at the meeting. I still consider this to be, like, I understand Member Furtado had a point about our elected officials not being discouraged from seeking additional revenue sources or making up gaps when we have them. The reason I have some opposition to this personally is just having been a person who was a notary as an elected official, the kind of folks that often came in seeking notary services, knowing for a fact that sometimes they were scraping together money to do the few things that they had to come in to do, or they came in with a check, or sometimes more often than not, a money order that was already made to a specific amount for their transaction. Also, there were people that came in that were not doing business here in the county, but literally came in because they knew that we offered notary services. I don't want to put an additional barrier, even though it seems very minute, into their way. I realize that for most of us, $3 does not really seem like much. In discussing it with some colleagues, I kicked around a couple of ideas. One of them was I wasn't sure if there was a way to do just a waiver, a fee waiver. I called around to other elected officials. I know that the circuit clerk has one, but that's for generally much larger fees for things like filing motions. But I did ask her what the lowest thing you could get a fee waiver for was, and she said certified copies for $6 you could get a fee waiver for. But those have to go through a judge, and that takes time. And I don't think that we should be obviously putting anybody through that either. I was trying to figure out a way that we could do something discretionary or quick. Because otherwise, the amount of money that we'd be making from this being relatively small did not seem like it was going to be worth trying to figure out a whole process. But in discussing it with some other colleagues, we did discuss the idea of maybe if there was a number of notarizations that were needed, below that number, we could do it for free. And if it was above a certain number, maybe we could look at assessing a fee then. So I will be, instead of asking for, or at least myself voting no on this and asking others to not put this additional barrier in people's way, we discussed the idea of perhaps seeing if we could postpone this to the next full board meeting and ask for a new proposal that includes just a fee for over a certain amount. So let's say if you need more than 4 things notarized, there's a $10 fee or something in that realm. But then anybody who is just walking in and seeking a notary would not be turned away. I believe I see a lot of movement from my left, and I believe Ms. Patton has something to add for color. I do. Please do.
I'll allow it.
All right, I'll keep this really short, but, and I apologize, I was not here to speak at the last meeting. I was dropping my kid off at college and the clerk was dealing with a funeral. So I have pulled together a couple things and I want to make a couple points that I think are gonna help clarify a couple things. With respect to charging a higher fee for more, statutorily, they just changed the statute on this and the limit. The most you can charge is a $5 flat fee. And we're not proposing that. We're just trying to recoup a little bit of money. So now, for those of you that are notaries or were notaries, there's more requirements now than what there used to be. There is required training, and there is journal keeping, and that relates to record retention and all the stuff that goes along with that, which is in the end, an additional expense to the clerk's office. What's happening right now, because we do like providing the service, so this isn't trying to create a barrier, but what is happening is because we do not charge anything in the county, and there are other departments that are notaries within the county, the other departments, and they have gone on record, they do not want to notarize documents off of the street unless it relates to county business, which is under their purview. But what is happening, because we do not charge a fee, and our friends down the road at Urbana Library will refer people to us, we are becoming the catch-all for the clerk and recorder's office. So I pulled some data together to clarify a couple things from the last meeting. So on average, between both offices, the clerk and recorders, we are doing 25 to 30 notaries a week. That takes time because not every document set is the same, and there's multiple documents and all of that. I had our account clerk pull the last 2 years of revenue, and it equates to about $6,000 to $10,000 that we have lost since the Secretary of State took over notary commissions, which means the people that want to become a notary that used to come into our office to get their certification, we've lost $6,000 to $10,000. With the proposed $3 flat fee, we would be able to recover approximately $4,000 to $5,000, which isn't nothing. I mean, I think in the last meeting, I don't remember who said it, but it was like, this isn't, it is worth it because we're taking time we're providing a service. And to be perfectly honest, for all of the notaries that I have done, and I'm talking about every single one, when we get done, they are stunned that they do not have to pay something. And while I appreciate that we want to provide a free service, we, again, are becoming the catch-all for all of the notaries. And we did lose, I consider $6,000 to $10,000 a year significant revenue for the county. And it's just something that we thought we would try to recover. I hope that you support it. I appreciate the discussion. I would ask that board members that are speaking, I'm not talking about like what your personal preference is, but when you're talking about figures and numbers and what we're losing, please refrain from doing that because then I have to come in and comment during the meeting and sort of clean that up with some data. But I appreciate the discussion. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to.
I'm going first. I have 3 questions.
Okay.
You should have gone first, Diane. When you said 6,000 to 10,000 of money loss, I didn't catch what the time frame was for that.
That's annually.
Annually, okay,
Yeah.
so per year, okay. I just want to make sure that I was like, it's not like per month or something, because that would be really significant. And then for the fee, I keep hearing it's a flat fee. Is that like per document or per the entire transaction with the person?
It means the entire transaction for the person. So the statutory language, and we consulted with the state's attorney so that we had clear understanding of what the fee schedule is. They raised it. It's a flat. The most that you can charge as a county organization providing notary services is $5. The clerk did not want to charge the full $5, which I appreciated because he did not want to create a barrier. So we went with the $3 flat fee per transaction, regardless of how many documents.
Okay, my last question is, does the clerk's office have to have the same number of notaries or whatever either way?
No. Are you talking about people that can notarize documents? Yeah. No, it's up to the department head's discretion. Let's see, we have one in the clerk side, which is me, and then we have 2 on the recorder side. And they do see the bulk of the notaries, but our office has picked up significantly, I would say, in the last 3 to 4 months.
Okay.
I was going to ask also how many notaries, because I believe the county pays for that notary.
They do.
And for the people to be notarized. And it sounds like the loss is for certifying new notaries, not necessarily anything else. So I don't know why we wouldn't continue certifying and charging for that. I mean, I think what you said was we're losing $6,000 to $10,000 annually for certifying notaries, not notarizing documents.
Yes. Yes, that is correct.
So if that those are two different animals, actually, the certification
Absolutely.
of other people and then
Yeah,
Okay.
the Secretary of State at the top
Right.
of the year took it over. And there was no real plan or discussion about it. It was like, we're taking your stuff and your money.
I guess the other question would be, in general, how many notaries do we have in this county? And how many are being utilized? Because maybe what we do is eliminate some of the notaries that maybe are not, I mean, maybe they got 3 in a department that don't need them. But I too, even $1 would be fine, but I just think that is a service. One of the very few services we provide that has something to do with a legal document that's very important to an issue for our constituents. And I know it's a lot of money in some respects, but $6,000 to $10,000 is not a lot in the whole thing of what we're doing for other people, depending on what these items are that we are notarizing, especially if they're going into the recorder's area. For the most part, then you're talking properties and things of that nature.
Hey, Angie. So I think you already know what I'm going to ask. I email Angie during my day job often and say, like, this person is homeless and still needs a birth certificate in order to get housing. There's no way they can pay anything for it because they are homeless. Does your office, have you had any conversations about having any kind of discretion in those kinds of situations where you see somebody like needs the document, man?
Yeah. Are you talking about somebody that could not potentially not pay? Absolutely. If we came across something where an individual came in, needed notarized documents and said, oh, wow, I wasn't prepared to pay and I do not have the funds available, we're gonna make an accommodation. Absolutely. We do it all the time, as Jen mentioned, with the birth records. We had an individual come in who needed a death record for a young man that just passed away recently that was in the news, and we provided those death records at no cost because there was a financial barrier there. So, like I said, we're willing to make that. And just for context, and we could not find where this was in place during what time and during what administration. At one point in time, the county clerk's office charged for notaries, and an administrator came in. I don't remember who or what. This is staff telling us this, and they just decided to stop charging altogether.
I should also just clarify that Angie and I do this through the McKinney-Vento Act. It's not like some kind of backdoor dealing.
Yeah.
It's a legal
In official
process.
capacities. Official capacities.
Hello.
Hello.
Quick question. So I think what Mike was suggesting is that it be $3 if it's more than one document, so 4 documents. Could it be something like that where it's charged if the transaction is more than notarizing, one document where it's 4? We were talking about potentially landlords who come in and want multiple documents notarized for their properties. They clearly can afford it, but like you said, the person who just lost someone may not be able to afford it.
Absolutely. I'd want to check in with the state's attorney on this because, like I said, the statute change and the fee schedule is relatively new. And I want to make sure that we actually have that discretion. My initial understanding, and this could be wrong, is that you either charge the fee or you don't. But I would love to check in with the state's attorney about that.
Are there any documents that the county clerk's office will not notarize?
I don't have the list in front of me. There are things that we legally cannot notarize, but I cannot, off the top of my head,
How
remember.
about election documents? I'm just getting this out
No,
for
we
people at
actually-
home. This came up last meeting. I just wanted to get it from you.
Actually, we have, I don't think there is anything statutorily that prevents us from that, but Clerk Ammons and I have had several discussions about this, and we will not notarize election documents just because of that conflict there, and we just want everything to be clean. Yeah.
I was just going to suggest, and I don't know if you were probably going to do the same thing, if there's still things that we want to check with the state's attorney's office on as far as like which situations we would need to charge a fee in, if it's possible to do a discretionary, like, yes, there's a fee, but we are able to waive that. Like, is it possible to postpone this until the October, I'd say, COW, just a few weeks from now, so we can follow up on those questions, or, okay.
I would second that motion from Jenny.
Sorry, I moved to postpone this until the October COW so that we can get those questions answered.
Can I suggest the October County Board?
I will accept that.
I don't have a problem with that, but my other thing is, when you're talking $3 a transaction, that there in itself takes time to take in and account for and get to the bank or run a credit card or all that. That's time. That's just as time consuming as sitting there and putting your stamp and your signature on something, in my mind. Just my thought.
I will say I appreciate Angie coming with some of that data that we didn't have last month, because that was, I think, knowing how much that we are losing from not having the notary commissions come through is important, and how much we can theoretically think we would stack up against that if we were charging this fee. And I think hearing a little bit more about the potential discretionary possibility is important too. In thinking about all this, I was trying to figure out the best way to even word that or have that policy in place, because that's hard to put out there without an official form that you would fill out or whatever, because I think we would all think that in the right situation we would do that, but how does somebody maybe even know that that's a possibility? So I do appreciate that additional context. So I mean, I'm perfectly fine with getting slight clarification and doing this, and if the board is willing to go along with this plan, that's fine with me too. Mostly I wanted to have the discussion, so appreciate it.
All right, anybody else? All right, so there is a motion to delay this until the October County Board meeting. That's what we were voting on. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right, that passes. Next on the agenda, we have adoption of resolution number 2023-233, authorizing payment of claims. Of a motion. Ms. Taylor, have a second. Ms. Hanauer Freeman. All right, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right, that passes. Adoption of resolution number 2023-234, purchase not following purchasing policy. Mr. Farney. Ms. Taylor. All right, any discussion? I thought it was interesting. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right, adoption of resolution number 2023-235, authorizing agreement between the Champaign County Board, the Champaign County Regional Planning Commission Early Childhood Education Program, Head Start, and the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, AFSCME Council 31, March 1, 2023 through February 28th, 2026. We do have Brandy from Head Start, who has suffered through this whole meeting, so if you had any questions, I'm sure she'd appreciate it. Michaels, Carter, Discussion. All right, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right, that passes. Thanks. Adoption of resolution number 2023-236, appointment to the Labor Committee. Guess I gotta read this. I'm just gonna go ahead and say it's gonna be John Farney appointed to this committee. I don't know, do we vote on that? Yeah. Okay, what's that? All right, whereas County Board Member and Labor Committee Vice Chair Stan Harper resigned from the County Board effective July 20th, 2023. Whereas Kyle Patterson, County Board Chair, has submitted to the County Board his appointment of John Farney to fill the member position on the Labor Committee left vacant by Stan Harper's resignation, and now therefore be it resolved by the Champaign County Board that the County Board does hereby advise and consent to the appointment of John Farney as a member of the County Board's Labor Committee, presented, adopted, approved, and recorded by this 21st day of September 80, 2023. Have a motion. Ingram, Michaels. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right, next we have adoption of resolution 2023-237, appointment to Vice Chair of the Finance Committee. Resolution appointing John Farney as the Vice Chair of the Finance Committee of the Whole to replace Jim Goss effective September 29th, 2023, whereas Jim Goss has submitted resignation from the County Board effective September 29th, 2023, and whereas Kyle Patterson has submitted to the County Board his appointment of John Farney to be the Vice Chair of the Finance Committee of the Whole to replace Jim Goss effective September 29th, 2023, and now therefore be it resolved by the Champaign County Board that the County Board does hereby advise and consent to the appointment of John Farney to be Vice Chair of the Finance Committee of the Whole, presented, adopted, approved, and recorded this 21st day of September, AD 2023. Motion.
Motion. Move. I so move for that.
All right, Jeff, Ellie. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Huh? Come on.
Could I get clarification on whether it's preferred JJ or John?
Honest to God truth. Anybody that knows me calls me JJ, so please call me JJ. But everything legal is John. Okay.
Well, it should be Sir JJ now.
Or Farney.
All right. Next, we have the semi-annual closed session minutes review. Do I have a motion?
I tried to do this in the cow, but we're going to do it now. I would entertain an omnibus motion. I move to follow the state's attorney's recommendation for open what is it? That's bad English. I'm going to read it the way it's written. For open the county board closed session minutes of July 8th, 2004, September 20th, 2007, November 20th, 2007, February 21st, 2008, April 23rd, 2009, May 21st, 2009, July 18, 2013, and February 18, 2016, and for all other closed session minutes of the county board, the county administrator's search committee, and the nursing home board of directors to remain closed.
Second by Taylor.
Second by Taylor.
I don't think we can discuss this unless we want to go into closed session. Please don't do that. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that passes. Next is,
Passing up.
all right, post-issuance compliance reporting for the 2022A and 2022B bonds, information only. Is there somebody? Tammy's not here. Is there anybody who has any comments on this? It is information only. Don't believe you have a presentation. Okay.
Can I ask?
Yeah.
While we're in the search, if we did have questions, who would we go to for guidance if we had? I don't have questions.
I mean,
tonight,
Tammy
but-
still kind of works here.
I
She's got to go a
know,
little bit
but-
farther.
Tammy has expressed availability as long as I don't want to, torture her, but if we had some really specific question, especially on something like this, or like she literally signed the document saying that, and that we could definitely speak with her and she'd pick up the phone. But
you.
it is, I also look forward to us onboarding a new person, and that will be good. And also, Tammy and Michelle spent hours together trying to do as much knowledge transfer as humanly possible.
And we are in the process of interviewing and stuff like that, so I'm not sure what the deadline is, but we should have somebody.
No, just knowing that it's still okay to reach out to Tammy with specific questions is helpful. Thank you.
All right, and then next is the property tax levy rate projection for 2024. Also information only. Did anybody have any comments about that? All right, and then we have the fiscal year 2024 budget decisions. Stephanie, do you want to?
This time, we are not going to go in a circle. This is your chance. If you would like to advocate for something specifically, you don't have to level all of your arguments. Right now, what we're trying to do is set some parameters for when we go into the discussion next Thursday, so that we could maybe have, I'm not saying, also, we have some folks who aren't here today, so I'm not saying if you don't mention it now, it's not like speak now or forever hold your peace. However, I would strongly encourage that if you want to have a productive conversation, right, when you have decision-making, you want to close boundaries, right? You want to figure out what is the playing field that we're on. So if you would like something to be on that playing field, when we have that conversation on Thursday, this is your chance to say, I really think we need to look hard at X. If you have some arguments you want to make now, you can, but also recognizing it's 8:30, you don't have to marshal all of your arguments tonight. We are going to have a special meeting for that, right? So we don't have to decide today. We are trying to decide what we're going to decide on. Eric.
Since I got to start last time, I figure I'll get the ball rolling again this time. I will reiterate my points, and they are few. I think that we need to work on the social worker mitigation specialist and perhaps a paralegal rather, for the public defender's office. I'd like to see if we can do at least one deputy. And again, I will tell you that we're working both sides of the aisle there when it comes to it, but I think that that's something that we've been always trying to do for a long time. And as far as other things, jury pay increase, which we talked about at length, and the household waste facility is another thing that I think that we should be supporting. So, and those are the things that I'll talk about next week.
Can I just clarify that the household waste facility costs probably won't come into play until 2025, but I just wanted to give you some, the things that we know are going to be coming up the year after next year, to put those on your radar at this point. So I don't think we have necessarily a decision we need to make about that next week, but it would by 2025 it should be open, and at that point they should be asking for the yearly support fee from a variety of entities.
Samantha?
I think the presentations tonight were very good concerning free phone calls for inmates, and that is weighing really heavy on my mind. Just being a resident at a county jail before, and also having family members in jail, that phone call is very crucial to one's mindset and mental health. And so I am definitely hoping that we can find a solution and hopefully get free phone calls to all of our inmates. Thank you.
Anybody else? Mr. Fernie?
The two items that I keep coming back to, I look at one on actually, I guess there's three. On a personnel side from the state's attorney's office, the civil attorney, in my short time here on the board, I keep seeing how much we rely on the state's attorney's office. It's concerning how much we use them and how short-staffed they are. So that's from a county board perspective. I also think the victim advocate at the state's attorney's office is very important with the changes that went into effect just this week with our judicial system. From a commodity standpoint, I feel strongly that we need to be looking at the high-speed scanner for the county clerk's office.
Anybody else? Michelle?
I don't know if I'm allowed to speak, but I'm just going to anyway. So I know you just had a lot of budget information thrown at you over the last couple of weeks, so a couple of reminders, and then I'm going to advocate on both ends of the spectrum. So we will have ARPA money next year. So for some of these things, keep that in mind. It's probably going to be somewhere in the ballpark of $1 million. So we can do some things with that next year for some of these things. And then I also just want to point out that we are still looking at a $700,000 deficit. So I agree that all of these things are worthy and probably needed, but that is a huge deficit. And again, if you remember, that's this year for 2024, and we'll be okay for 25, maybe 26, and then it's going to hit us really hard in 27 and 28. And that is a conservative estimate on growth of our expenses. So just something to keep in mind, especially when we're talking about personnel, because those costs just compound year over year over year, and they grow exponentially. So having said that, I also want to advocate for the civil attorney. I do think the civil attorney is an investment. It's not an expense, particularly with the request that they need someone with real estate expertise. There is just so much real estate transaction that the county has to deal with that has grown a lot. And right now that's on Matt's plate for the most part, which takes away his ability to focus on more complex issues that we really need his expertise focused on. So I just want to, as a individual who happens to work for the county, just advocate that I think there really is a need, and that could really save us a lot of money in the long run to have that third civil attorney, actually fourth civil attorney available.
I do, my guess is Liz is here for this, so if you would like to say something briefly, since I guess, my guess is that's why you're here. I mean, either that or you just like us a lot.
You're very smart. So I just want 2 minutes, and I know I'm not on the agenda. I tried to get on and I was too late because at the cow I had COVID, so I was home watching you guys on YouTube. I want to just comment. I circulated a memo to you all about the 2 grants that the Public Defender's Office has outstanding right now. None of the money has come in yet. But in the memo, I very strongly requested that the board fund my mitigation specialist position and allocate money for that in my personnel budget. The reason I did that, and I think I was pretty clear, was that although the grant has been promised for this year, it is not guaranteed. And as a responsible manager, I am not entirely in favor of spending grant money on a position and then that grant money goes away, that position is unfunded. I don't think it's responsible management. However, that being said, after communications with Dr. Furtado and with Michelle and with some other people, I am willing to change that position because of how important I think the mitigation specialist spot is. I am willing to contribute whatever the board thinks is necessary from that grant that I got from the Supreme Court. It's $132,000. I have spent most of it in my head already, but I can unspend some of that if it means I get that position, because that's how important it is to me, and I just wanted the board to be very clear about that. If I get the other grant, then that will be paid for the period of 2, 4, or 6 years. So my hope is that you guys would give me the money, and then I would say, just kidding, I can pay for it, and then we would be fine for 2, 4, or 6 years. But if we are at such a dire point that no new positions are going to be funded by this board for the next year, I'm willing to do this because that's how important it is to me. And I just wanted to make that crystal clear after I wrote the memo with a very strong position saying, don't do that to me, please. Now I'm coming back to you and saying, if you decide to do that, I will not hate you all. So thank you, and that's why I'm here. And I'm happy to answer any questions if anybody has any.
You promise not to hate it?
I promise. Over this.
Sorry, I'm raising my hand and I'm the one doing this part. I was like, why won't anybody call on me? Wow. I think I want to say, Liz, I really appreciate that. I appreciated our conversation. Just to be transparent, I had a pretty, I think a productive conversation with both our public defender and our sheriff, both of whom have received grants for various things that can be used for various things. And I said, just given the reality of the scope of the budget, may I humbly suggest the best way to get your positions for 2024 is to leverage that grant money and make it very hard for us to say no. So I would support definitely a mitigation specialist if, it was in whole or in significant part supported by a grant, and we could have a conversation if, we could cover fringe, if they could cover salary, that kind of thing. And likewise, I had a conversation with the sheriff. We said he provided a memo about the grant he received for $110,000, which is essentially revenue replacement, right, for body camera stuff that he's already had purchased. And I made the suggestion, I think that the position he really wants the most is the sergeant. It's a $250,000 position when you talk about outfitting and 1 year salary. And I said, if you wanted to take the $110,000 that you received from that grant and think about what you wanted to use it for, right? Instead, help outfit this new person with that. We could probably come in with some ARPA money to make up that difference in terms of outfitting the person. And we have many empty correctional lines right now. I think if we converted 2 of them, we could get really close to getting it done. So I would, we just had that discussion. He didn't indicate one way or another whether or not he'd be interested in that. But I would, because I just kind of threw it at him. If Liz comes and says, yes, you could use, we have a conversation about exactly where that figure is. Some of my grant money to support this position, I would support the mitigation specialist. If Dustin comes to us and says, I would support thinking about how we could fund that position so it's just not a $250,000 hit on the general fund, I would support that. I will say, I kind of want to echo to some degree what board member John Farney said, what JJ said, is that I do think the legislature has given, at least Liz can decide if she wants to use her grant or not. They have not given any grants to the SA side specifically around, and my understanding is they're going to correct that in the future, but they haven't done that right now. And so I think I would be potentially open to the victim advocate, just to be fair, right? And because there isn't a grant that the SA could go to and say, I'm going to use it, because it just doesn't exist yet. I also will say on that, the state's attorney has indicated that she could get by next year with a part-time person, and could maybe bring that cost down a little bit. I do have sympathy for the SA civil attorney, and I think having that in the discussion next week is fine. I also think it's one of the higher priced items on the list, and so I kind of go back and forth on that. And then the other thing I just want to say that I advocate for is $12,500 for the HR specialist, because that is what the executive is short on that line. And he already moved one of his staff, changed a position, got rid of an admin position in order to cover almost all of the costs of that. And I think for 2024,
the ability, the willingness to say, you could use some of my grant money, I could rethink my lines, I'm willing to take a part-time person, I'm willing to recode, that to me is what we, like, that we can do, I think. Just a straight, can you fund this out of the general fund? I don't think we could do it for 2024.
And I would also, I don't know if this is even legal. I don't work for the State's Attorney's Office Civil Division, and I just stole one of their people, so she probably hates my guts right now. But I would also like the paralegal position to be created, even if unfunded, because I am actively seeking out alternative grants. And I'd rather have it in my FTE and then be able to pay for it, like knowing that it's not funded yet, but it might be. I still would like the position. So if you guys do that, I would appreciate that. And now I'm going to leave.
Good night.
Anybody else?
I'll say what my positions are is, and I did say when I think it was last week, I said I just definitely want to approach this with an open mind. And then there's still some information that would help me. So I was unaware that maybe there were some negotiations with the sheriff's office to maybe adjust or whatever, check and adjust. And is that more, the grant money goes for the equipment only? And it's a one-time cost and that's it, period, right? Is that what you were saying? Okay, good. I'm just trying to understand, thank you. And then, so as a veteran, I'm gonna put as my priority the veterans ask. I'm going to put that as my priority. And then trying to figure out if I was a 2 or a 3, whether between the civil attorney and the social worker. And probably if I had more information of what the higher priority is, and I think I may be leaning more towards the social worker mitigation specialist over the civil attorney. Because didn't you say there were some adjustment on the civil attorney? What were you saying about that?
So a few things. There's 4 positions across the 2 offices. The public defender wants a paralegal and a social worker, a mitigation specialist, and has indicated that she's willing to use some of her grant money for the mitigation specialist. That would leave the paralegal unfunded.
Yeah.
The state's attorney has a victim's advocate and a civil attorney, and has indicated that a part-time victim's advocate is something that she'd be willing to do for the upcoming year, with the goal of eventually getting, let's just be real, they all want all these positions forever if they
Well, I
could
mean,
get
who
them.
wouldn't? I'm just,
Yeah.
are you
So
saying
hopefully that's helpful.
so the state's attorney's preference is a part-time victim's advocate?
Yes.
So when we get together next week, then we'll have it all broken down like a spreadsheet and plus or minuses, I don't know. That'd be helpful. And then I agree with you about the HR generalist. I thought we talked about that quite a bit at length. And Steve sacrificing an admin, right, in order to get an HR generalist for the whole county, I thought, am I right? I just think the county needs an HR generalist. And is it possible, just thinking out of the box, is it possible the HR generalist could also do some grant writing or not? Because I thought we all wanted grant writing sort of because we thought it would generate revenue, et cetera, but when I look at the salary breakdown for the grant coordinators, you know, more than an attorney or more than a sheriff or more than whatever. Those are just my thoughts, right or wrong, those are just my thoughts, but I really think an HR generalist is an essential part for our county functions, that's all.
I think my colleague here to the left was the most passionate. We have in the budget for this year money for a part-time grant writer. We don't have full-time grant writer. So if that's something we want to think about, we would have to fund that. But it's already budgeted for a part-time grant writer. I do think maybe we can bring in a part-time grant writer with an actual job description and see like, you know, if they make us a bunch of money, then it's a pretty easy conversation to have that we need to expand it. I don't know. Okay. Diane, or Jeff, were you done? And then Diane?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, Diane.
Just real quick, inquiring minds. Do grant writers ever get a percentage of the money they bring in as part of their salary?
Like a bounty? Not typically. Like, I've done contractual grant writing work in my life before. You typically just get paid for the grant, right? Yeah. The only way is like, if you have a grant manager, maybe that might be part of the like administrative fee. You know what I mean? Probably my guess is Delitzo, some of his 7% admin fees that he does on federal grants, some of that is going for the compliance manager. And in a lot of cases, that person is also the grant writer, but yeah. Okay. So I just want to make sure, I also want to say, I would be open to Dustin. One of the things I think that's really important for the board is the FTE question. To be real, elected officials could kind of move things around. Like they're not, you know what I mean? Like the one exception is in the budget, we say how many deputies there are, and there's a number. And that is part of the budget we pass. I would also maybe be willing to add a deputy with no funding, with the caveat that if what happens with these small towns, do you know what I mean? So to give him the ability, if he gets agreements to cover that salary and to provide those services for the small town, but it would not be, here's more money for a deputy. It would be, and we could clearly articulate that in the budget. Okay. Yes, Jeff.
At the cow, we talked about, there's about 40, 45 open positions.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure, it's, you know, since I've been here, it's run between 45 to 60 open positions. And the forecast was about $2.5 million unspent obligation because those people weren't hired. Where does that $2.5 million go if it's not used?
Okay, so that's not like an actual $2.5 million. That's to show you, like, if we didn't have those people, the only way I can do that equation is based on a year. So it's just to show you if we didn't have that position filled for a year, that's how much money we'd be losing. Because there's just no way for me to do that equation every time I add a position based on how many hours are left. So it's not that there's like 2.5 sitting somewhere ready to come back to us. That's just to give you a frame of reference for how big of a vacancy issue that we have. So probably by October, I can give you a closer number of what our personnel savings will be, but I don't have that at this point.
So then just a follow-up. Is there a sweep account associated with that? In other words, after a quarter, after 6 months, after 9 months, or is that money locked in allocation only for employees and it can't be extracted for other uses?
The way we budget is once we give the elected official their personnel budget, our hope is that they use it in the way that they described in their budget, but they have wide discretion over their personnel budget. However, in terms of they have to use it for personnel. If they want to use it for, say, equipment or contractual services, they have to come back before this body. And we have to vote, right? So you could take some of your contractual money and use it to buy envelopes, or use your envelope money to do something contractual. You cannot take personnel money and use it on anything else or add more money to your personnel category without coming to this body.
But at the end of the year, unspent personnel money goes back into the general fund. But after the budget has closed and the budget year has ended, within the budget time frame, basically the check you wrote them is their money to do with as they want for personnel.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Because I want to make Thursday's meeting, I don't want to belabor this meeting, but I want to make Thursday's meeting as tight as possible. Is there anybody, it seems as if there's wide consensus on the HR specialist. Is there anybody who does not feel that's the case? Because we only have to discuss things we have to decide on. If everybody's like in agreement, we right now could say go forth and we're in agreement. So is there anybody that doesn't think, does anybody want the HR specialist to be on our special decision meeting next Thursday? It seems to me that there's wide consensus for the circuit, or for the county clerk's scanner to come from ARPA money, and we know we have it. Is that, does anybody disagree with that statement? Okay. So what I think we want to okay, is everybody cool with the fact that the hazardous waste facility, we don't need money till 2025? Okay. All right. So it seems to me that the items that we need to decide upon are the social worker / mitigation specialist. That's the same thing, just so we're clear, for the public defender's office, the state's attorney, the victim's advocate for the state's attorney's office, and the civil side attorney. I should have spoke more carefully. And then the jury pay. Those are the 4 things that I think people have said that they would like to discuss. And then I can reach out to the sheriff and ask him, does he want anything? Because I do think some of those are decision points he would have to make if he's not in, like, or does anybody want just the sheriff on there regardless? Or do you only want it if he wants to come up with some funding? Like, do you know what I'm saying?
I want to hear if he needs money. If he can work it out within his own budget and reclassify or whatever you do with the correctional officers he does not have, because he does have funds in his personnel line by not having those hired, then we don't need to discuss anything, in my opinion.
So I'll reach out to the sheriff and have, give him some time to digest what we discussed and see if he wants to be on that agenda. But just to reiterate, public defender, social mitigation specialist, SA, civil side attorney, and victim's advocate, the jury pay. And so yes, to Jeff's point, I'm going to ask them to pull those documents that had to do with those things, so it's in the packet, so that we are not having to go back for 7 packets ago to try to remember what was discussed. And then the sheriff, if he wants that, if that will be productive. Yes, here, and then Jenny.
Thanks, Jenny. 2 more. Grant coordinator. We should have the discuss. I believe we should have this. Or did we already decide it's half pay? We're not doing full pay. Is that over with or what?
Oh, no, that's a good question. Does anybody want the potential for the grant coordinator to be full pay to be on that agenda?
I know you're not going to agree with that.
Full-time, right? Well, I mean, you could go for it. Yeah, full pay, or full-time, yeah. Do you want it, Beth?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so and then the other one is the VAC admin.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't put that on there because we can't say no to that.
Oh.
We could debate it all you want. I don't know that we have the power to say no. So that's been decided.
Thanks, I'm just
Right? I mean, am I
process.
incorrect about that? I don't believe we have the power to tell the VAC no. So therefore, it's in the that's part of the $700,000 shortfall includes that $130,000. Okay. Yes.
Oh, you can go first, Jenny. Your hand was up first.
I'm sorry. I don't know if I missed anything when I went to the restroom, but do the unfunded positions need to be decided upon next week, or are we just do we need to do further anything on that?
So the unfunded positions, that's what we're basically. Let me be very clear about this.
I mean, the ones that people requested be created as unfunded that we are potentially going to fill via grant. Do we need to do anything further with that as far as
No.
Okay.
No, because that's not a thing.
No, those will come up through the JEC process because
Yeah.
we'll officially create the position, grade it, and then give it to you as the normal
Right.
recommendation.
And this is the budget, right? So we only have to decide things that are in the budget, if that makes sense. The one exception being if we want an unfunded deputy, Like, that has
So-
to be a vote that we take.
Yeah, that's
like
actually a
formal-
it's a resolution or ordinance. It's one
Yeah.
of the two, so I don't know.
But
that-
it's usually done, it doesn't have, you're right, it doesn't have to be done in concert with the budget. We could just indicate to the sheriff, it's usually done in concert with the budget, but we could just indicate to the sheriff that we would be open to revisiting that resolution if and when funding came available for that position, thus making our lives easier next Thursday.
That was my question. I was gonna ask about the paralegal.
Okay. Oh, yeah, okay, so with the, okay, so anything else that was asked for?
But she said she doesn't want it funded.
Oh, I see what you're saying, yeah, okay, gotcha. Yes,
Thank you. I thought there were a number of requests for salary increases. Is that part of this too? I thought the state's attorney wanted $10,000 per attorney.
you're right.
And the circuit
Yeah.
clerk wanted salary increases, yada, yada. Is that included in the discussion, or is that already decided?
They definitely asked for that. As of this moment, until you brought it up, nobody on the board advocated for that.
Well, I'm
So
not, I'm
like,
just wondering.
do
should we
you want that
discuss
on
it?
the, like, do you want that on the agenda for Thursday?
I think it needs to be addressed, and I do believe it should be on the agenda, even if it's 10 minutes, it was asked. Are we just saying, no, we're not even thinking about it? I'm just trying to understand the process.
Let me be, let me be clear, let me
Well,
be.
that's okay, I'm just not advocating for or against, I'm trying to understand the process.
Let me be real transparent. Anything, you could still, like, this isn't, I can't stop you from bringing up anything on Thursday. Everything is still open, right? It's just an open discussion on the budget. What I'm saying is, if, not just that, anything else, Judge Rosenbaum's assistant, funding for the paralegal, the CJ's person, all of that, we're saying we're not going to discuss on Thursday because nobody on the board has indicated they want to fund it. We only have to discuss things somebody wants to fund, right?
Okay, I'm just going through my checklist of all the things of the ask, I didn't know the process.
Right.
As
So,
a new person, I don't
right.
understand the process.
This is not always the process. We don't usually have $2 million in asks. We don't have, last year, we didn't even have this meeting on Thursday. There was literally nothing to decide. So I'm not saying we can't discuss anything else. What I'm saying is, unless there's a board member or a set of board members that want to specifically advocate for something, I don't know that we have to plan to discuss something that nobody's advocating for.
All right.
I just assumed that we were all advocating for that last week, like when we talked about it at the cow, and pretty much everybody in the room said that we want to make sure that we are trying to take care of our staff. And so definitely would like to talk about next week if there's any way we can do this within our current budget, or how we will look at the additional funding sources that Michelle addressed last week to make that happen in the coming term.
All right, we're gonna have a whole budget meeting next week.
Right.
There's still a lot of stuff to get
I know.
to,
So real quick-
some of our staff here have been here
I know, I'm
spilling
sorry.
for 12 hours, so if we could wrap it up.
Okay.
Yeah,
Try.
I was going to advocate for Kathy Larson and let her do her thing,
Okay.
and so that we can get her out of here, and then advocate for next month's ARPA discussion be the first thing on other business, so that Kathy can go home just a little bit earlier.
I'd be all for that. I do have to say one more thing, though, and I do get it, and I'm sorry that it's late, but this is, as some public person said, this is what we do. This 3 months is 99% of what we do. And if it takes 3 hours, it takes 3 hours, okay? So, that said, yes, we can have a conversation about we want to be more equitable, right, for our staff and think about like how we budget and salary fairness. What we have to decide Thursday is we want to put a dollar amount in a spreadsheet, right? And so we could say we want to be cautious on new spending because we want to do that. That's a philosophy. Do we have a decision point, right? I want us to all focus on decision points. Is there a decision point that we need to make on Thursday so that the folks that are preparing the budget could put it on a spreadsheet, because in October, we have to vote on dollars. Does that make sense, right? So like, if you want, and Jeff and Jenny, and this is totally cool if you want, if you want that to be an inflection point, a decision point, that you want us to budget specific dollar amounts for that need in the 2024 budget, then yes, it should be on the plan for Thursday. If you think that that's something we should be working towards in a more general way and being cautious on how we spend, it doesn't need to be on the Thursday meeting, because the Thursday meeting is about decision points. And I probably should have made that clear at the beginning of this, but again, I'm just kind of making this up as I go. So the two of you that brought it up, do you want it on, now that I said that, do you want it on the conversation points for Thursday?
I don't need it on the conversation points for Thursday.
Okay.
It just sounded to me like we were saying, oh, it's not important to talk about.
I hear
So-
that. I totally hear that. Yes. Mr. Wilson, do you want it on the decision points for Thursday?
I'm going to say yes.
Okay.
I just want to remind everyone again, because I know you've had a lot of information being thrown at you in the last couple of weeks. After we get done with the budget, we will come back around to the compression study and actual implementation. And at that point, I can give you a dollar and cents figure and a couple of different options of how we could do this. So just to make sure it doesn't feel like this has fallen off the table, or to give anyone the impression that you don't care about this, there is a plan that we can do. I just don't have those details right this moment, but I'm thinking by November, December, we can start talking concretely about how we could resolve this issue and what that would look like.
Okay. I think I would also like Judge Rosenbaum's position on there for next week.
Okay. All right. We're good?
Can I just for clarification? So I'll update the two spreadsheets with the positions and the tangible items to what has been narrowed down here. Is there any other information that you felt like you didn't have before that would help with decision-making on Thursday? Okay.
And finally, I just want to say this. When I saw how big the shortfall was, I was like, I have no clue how we're going to make this decision. So this is just what I came up with. If anybody has suggestions on how this process can be improved, I'm here for it, right? Like, I just wanted to, like, we have to, by Thursday, give our best indication to our staff. So in a week, this is the budget we want to see, right? And then have a budget we could pass a couple weeks later in October. So like, the rubber meets the road on Thursday, right? So trying to figure out how to structure that conversation is immensely important, because there's timelines for all of this. And it has to be specific. We want to put this dollar amount in this budget line, right? That's what we have to decide. Okay, Kathy, I'm real sorry.
Are you still on that topic? Do you want me to start with the ARPA update? Okay. We included the normal monthly update. We've added projects that have been completed, so that continues to grow, that list of completed projects. And then we continue to work on all of these different projects are in various stages, whether it's the county department expenses or these outside agencies that are working on services. And then we also still have a few of the newer contracts either still in negotiation or being signed, and they're filling out their initial paperwork to get their first payments. And then this next month, we'll be doing another round of quarterly reporting in October. And then I'd be happy to try to answer any questions on the specifics. We try to include the update as far as how much has been spent in the financial spreadsheet and the project status as well in the timeline.
So this is something that Board Member Wilson and I were talking about. The $9.8 million for broadband projects, the whole kit and caboodle there, we projected $9.8 million for this year, and here we are in September, and they haven't spent any of that? Or is it just that they haven't been paid for it yet? How's that working?
Yes, so for Finley, they are the consulting agency that's helping to oversee the projects. They do have some invoices currently in process, some small amounts. For the other 3 major projects, there's 2 of the rural broadband expansion projects with Volo and NextLink, and they were in process of applying for additional grant funding this year to secure that. And so in conjunction with that, and then working with them to get the signed contracts and be ready to start their projects, we're still getting those underway, and they still expect to have costs beginning this fall on those projects. The other one with Volo is the working with Habitat or Housing Authority, and that's also still slated to have costs starting this fall. But yeah, it's just been these other grants that they're applying for is a major thing. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Real quick, Kyle, I just wanted to point out on these water projects that are done, we gave $805,000 and that leveraged an additional $3.4 million. That's exactly what we wanted to do. We wanted our money to be seed. And so just shout out to Triple Fork, Ivesdale, Ludlow, and Ogden for that.
All right, next we have adoption of resolution number 2023-238, authorizing an intergovernmental agreement with Cunningham Township. What? Carter and Locke. Is there any discussion on this? This was part of the community violence prevention task force recommendations.
Just really quick, the original proposal was $850,000 to purchase bricks and mortar housing, to do some renovations of that housing, and then some staffing stuff, right? We gave them $350,000. She promptly went out and got a $500,000 grant to do the bricks and mortar, another $530,000 grant to do the staffing, and she wants to put our $350,000 to the renovations and to the stuff to get people in. Like, so for example, if you're gonna put somebody in that housing and they're in arrears in their rent, you gotta pay that off in order for them to come, right? So that moving costs, all that kind of thing for the life of this grant. So she was able to get more money than she even needed originally for the project. And again, our $350,000 leveraged $1 million, but she's still being able to do the whole project. And I want to say, I think it was Aaron that kept bringing up, like, don't you need to like operate these things? And Aaron kept bringing it up. And so that is actually like what this is going to go, like that piece of it. So again, maybe our lesson should be like, we shouldn't give anybody what they ask for, just give them a little bit and see if they can go get the rest.
All right, any other discussion? Beth?
Notice how many times the word grant came up with those numbers. Just saying.
Very subtle. All right, any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right, next is request for ARPA County Department funding. $83,418 is unallocated, and the 2 things we have to discuss are the animal control spay and neuter program, which the ask was $75,000, and the county clerk's election truck purchase, which is now approximately $50,000. Discussion.
Like deja vu all over again.
Any discussion? All right.
I'll do it. I was an advocate for the truck, but I think the truck money goes to the scanner, and anything we have left over that, we can give to the spay neuter program. So let's count some votes and remove some things.
Okay, so hold on, just to make sure I understand again, because I'm the one that has to go figure out how to execute this. So when you say money for the scanner, so we've got the 83 whatever that's been appropriated for this year. And then I would ask that after tonight, we kind of close the book on ARPA spending for this year, for fiscal year 23, because otherwise we have to do a bunch of things that I don't really know how to do. So are you saying scanner money for fiscal year 24, like January 1st, or are you saying scanner money from what's here in the 84?
I'm saying that this 83,000, we contribute 50K, the truck money, from this year. I assume that's this year's money, to this scanner. I know it won't pay for the whole thing, but we just found out that if we don't give them everything, they find it somewhere else. And then the remainder of that to a spay and neuter program, since these are these two lingering asks. Our caucus decided after lengthy deliberation, the truck is a no. So nobody wants the truck, sadly. So.
I want the truck. I didn't say that.
Diane?
Gee. Okay. If I'm reading this correctly, we actually have 83 and there's 2 requests. So let's give the 75,000 to this pay and neuter and leave $8,418 towards the scanner for next year. Because the total that we have is 83.
Yeah, I'm saying
No truck.
put the 50 towards the 50 that was the truck is now a scanner, and we'll have to deliver it in someone else's truck, and then the remainder of that to the spay and neuter program.
Jen?
I think I'm in favor of Diane's idea, which would fully fund the animal control request and then still fund the scanner just a few months from now. It would leave us with a little bit of a surplus, but I think that's okay, right? We can.
Yeah, it'll just roll into next year and we can
Okay.
deal with it then.
Stephanie?
Just a point of information. The 50K is not enough for the scanner. The rest of the money for the scanner is coming from money that we had essentially allocated to the clerk's office several years ago and said, go forth and spend this on equipment. There's $42,000 left. Is that money even in his budget for this year?
Yeah, it's in his budget, it's in his capital budget, so,
Okay.
I mean, I can talk with him, like, he could probably move forward with some kind of down payment on the scanner and get the ordering process going this year, if then we can finish up the payment early 2024.
And to be clear, we can budget, we don't have to wait to budget the $50,000. We don't have to do anything. We could budget the $50,000 from ARPA money into his budget, literally, like, I think we've already decided that, like, so it wouldn't hold him up.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure, as a person who has to buy big things at the university, that the scanner is here for the November election, running and ready to count votes, period.
Yeah, I mean, I think the goal is to have it here for the March election, so.
Even better.
Ms. Auction?
I guess I'm still not clear, are we saying we want the 50 to come from the remaining ARPA dollars, or is that a separate? Okay.
I think what I've heard is we're gonna do 75,000 from this 84,000 to animal control.
Okay.
And then you have essentially verbally authorized that January 1, we can send another 50,000 to the clerk's office to pay for the rest of the scanner. He already has 42,000, so I will talk with him about getting the purchase going now. Can we get this going right away, knowing that we can finish off that payment immediately after the first of the year?
Okay, I think that's what Jen was saying. I don't think that's what Eric was saying, though.
Yeah, but I'm okay with that.
Okay.
Also, to be clear, we have ARPA money that we haven't spent. And so if the clerk came back to us and said, by golly, if I could get this scanner in November, it would change my life, and everybody agrees he gets the scanner, we could just have it on the budget as an appropriation. Like, we could always, do you know what I'm saying? Like, if for some reason, I don't anticipate we would need to do that, but we could put more ARPA money into this year's budget. We just put how much we thought we would need. And we came pretty close, I think, right? But like, so that's always something we could do if we needed to. We wouldn't have to wait to January 1 if like it was gonna, but the clerk was here. I did ask him can he wait till January for this? And he said yes.
Mr. Wilson?
we had similar discussions on our caucus. And we felt it would be more beneficial for that $50,000 or whatever his request is to go for a scanner. So, I mean, however it works out is fine, whether the whole $75,000 goes for the spay and neutering and the balance, whatever is left of the $83,000, gets held in reserve, or however the ARPA funds work, goes for the scanner. But we seem to be pretty much in alignment to say no on the truck.
All right, so it sounds like, if I'm understanding, the current proposal is $50,000 towards the scanner, and then the remaining,
75
I think 75 to spay and neuter, we hold the rest in balance, and it's fine to allocate earlier if needed, but January 1st for that 50,000 to, with the anticipation that he would still be able to potentially have it by the March election if we're waiting till January.
Yeah, and I will make it clear to him that if that appears to be an issue, you all want to know so that we can address that. So,
Jen?
And I think it is not a unanimous decision, but I think the general understanding, just so that we can take the bull by the horns or whatever we want to say, is, I don't know, I'm very tired, is that we will not have enough support to go forward with the truck at this time.
So my understanding and the directive to the staff is we are removing the ARPA allocation piece from the agenda for the remainder of this year unless something urgent comes up. Is that a general agreement? Okay.
ARPA allocation. ARPA reported, the reports that
No.
Kathy provided, we still want monthly.
Yeah, yeah,
Because
yeah.
those are amazing.
No, just this debate over the allocation requests. So you'll get a
Okay.
couple months break and then we'll go back at it hardcore in January.
All right, so 75,000 for the animal control, and then, what'd you say, is that 8,300 left? But that's just gotta go. Okay, so can we see a straw poll of who supports that plan? All right. Sounds good. That's the last item, so seeing no other business, I call this meeting adjourned.